Hi guys, welcome back. We are here to catch up on Phantasma by Kaylie Smith. And let's begin. We're out here in my living room today. It's all natural lighting and my cat's on the floor. So if you hear her, that's what she's up to. So we left off on page 40. Mr. Lafitte, who had been unable to join their meeting due to an irate client demanding his attention, gave them a smug look as they passed his desk. It took everything in Ophelia not to give him a crude gesture. Genevieve, however, didn't resist. Ophelia pushed her way outside and rushed down the street, wanting to put as much distance between herself, those men, and the bank as possible. "Ophi," Genevieve called after her, "slow down." Ophelia turned into an alley, ducked behind a large stack of wooden crates, and leaned back against the dirty brick wall as she slid to the ground. Touching her forehead to her knees, she focused on steadying her breathing, clutching the crumpled papers for dear life. "You're failing your family's legacy already, and you haven't even begun," the shadow voice told her. "Knock on the wall 3 times, and everything will be okay." She obeyed. 1, 2, 3. "Ophi," Genevieve said breathlessly as she finally caught up, wrinkling her nose at the grimly alley she now found herself in. "Ophelia, let's discuss this. We need to be realistic with ourselves about the situation." "There's nothing to discuss." Ophelia's tone was drenched with bitterness. "We are not signing over our house to those scam artists. Don't you see those checks? The signatures were forged on 2 of them, so who knows what else they could be lying about. I can't let this happen." Genevieve bit her lip at the mention of the forged checks. "But if we're in debt, wouldn't it be better to take their deal and just be rid of it? This could finally be our excuse to leave, to travel. I know you feel like you have to stay here and take care of Grim Manor forever, but maybe this is a sign." Deep down, Ophelia knew that Genevieve was probably right. A normal person would be celebrating Grim Manor's demolition. A part of her agreed that maybe this was finally the opportunity to be free. After all, this wasn't her doing, so she couldn't really be blamed for the downfall of their family's legacy. But another part of her knew that if she didn't fight to keep it, she was making a clear choice. Ophelia shook her head and whispered, "I can't be a failure. I won't." Grim Manor was their home, and dreams aside, Ophelia couldn't imagine leaving the place that raised her, the last place that she could feel her mother and her grandmother, the only place that knew her. Body and soul, skin and bones, the manor's dust currently clung to the skirts of her dress, its dirt beneath her fingernails, the scent of wild roses woven in her hair. She had spent all 23 years of her life running around the creaking floorboards, playing hide-and-seek within its walls, falling asleep in the parlor after stealing sips of absinthe from its cupboards. "I'm not giving up that easily, Genevieve," she said louder now, pushing herself up from the ground. "Why do you think that would be giving up?" Genevieve demanded. "Why can't you see that you're holding yourself back, trying to fit into a mold Mother made for you? I know you, Ophi. You want to do bigger things than stay in Grim Manor for the rest of your—" "It doesn't matter what I want," Ophelia shook her head. "But Ophi, for fuck's sakes, Genevieve, stop!" Ophelia snapped, surprising even herself at the venom in her tone. Unlike her sister, Ophelia didn't use expletives very often, but Genevieve's optimism was wearing on her nerves. "I'm barely keeping it together. And you going on and on with this nonsense about leaving and traveling is not helping. We're not children anymore. Mother is no longer going to be there to coddle you whenever you make a mistake because you were too impulsive or didn't think your decisions all the way through. It's going to be me cleaning up your messes now. I've never asked for you to clean up my messes. I can take care of myself. I can help you take care of this too. Why won't you just let me help?" Genevieve implored. "Help how?" Ophelia challenged. "By forging checks?" Genevieve winced. I knew it. I knew Mother's handwriting better than anyone, Vivi," Ophelia said. "I've been reading her notes and spell books for all of my life while you've been out gallivanting with your friends. Did you think I wouldn't notice such a detail?" I did what I thought was right at the time," Genevieve said, tilting her chin up in defiance. "Why didn't you come to me?" Ophelia implored. "Why didn't you ask for help? And where did you even get the money from to write those checks?" Genevieve looked away now. "It doesn't matter where I got the money. All that matters is I took care of things, all right? I bought us the time we needed then, but we have an opportunity to start fresh now." to stop trying to outrun a problem that will always be 10 steps ahead of us. Where did you get the money? Ophelia pressed. Genevieve's fist balled at her side. Why can't you just leave it alone? Ophelia shook her head. That tells me all I need to know, which is exactly my point. Your good intentions won't matter if you stumble into a mess way over your head. And then it will be my job to fix it, just like the mess we're in right now. Genevieve's face drooped with hurt at Ophelia's words. In a blink, she spun on her heels and ran out of the alley. Hell, Genevieve, wait, Ophelia called after her. Genevieve rounded the corner and disappeared. Ophelia picked up her skirts as she chased around her sister, but by the time she made it out of the dark corridor, Genevieve was nowhere in sight. Chapter 6, Trespassing. Hours later, Ophelia found the day had come and gone as she meandered through the city streets. She decided Genevieve must have suddenly made sense, and it would serve Ophelia right for how she treated Genevieve to have to walk home in the dark, alone, well into the hour that devils come out to play. Just as an insidious, devil-riddled attraction came to town. She picked up her pace as she headed home. The streets were lined with houses painted in hues of white and pink and green, each at least 2 stories high with bay windows and wraparound porches that featured brightly colored doors. She always knew she would stay in Grim Manor, but sometimes she imagined herself in a pastel green house in the city, close enough to the French Quarter that she could walk to the cafes every morning, in the bookstore every afternoon. But her mother was gone, and that dream was now buried 6 feet under as well. Why can't you see that you're holding yourself back trying to fit into a mold mother made for you? She shook Genevieve's words from her mind. Everything is going to be okay, she told herself, keeping her focus on steadying her breathing as she headed down the main road out of the inner city. She knew she couldn't let her fixations overrun her mind out here, alone, in the dark. She counted out the miniatures in her head, knowing there should be only about 36 minutes more until she made it back to Grim Manor's front gate. Before she made it even 5 more minutes down the road, however, she caught a ghostly blue flash out of the corner of her eye. Ophelia stopped in her tracks. This was about where the old cathedral should be, but she couldn't make out its shape through the sun and fog. Her heart thundered in her chest as she broke her mother's first rule. She squinted into the dark. She couldn't see the apparition, but she knew it was there from the light vibration in the air that made the flesh on her arms pebble ever so slightly. She approached the gate, searching for the telltale flash of blue, her heeled boots crunching on the oak leaves and acorns littering the ground. She leaned her hands against the bars of the gates and found herself pitching forward when they split open with a rusty creak. Suddenly made sense, and it would serve Ophelia right for how she treated Genevieve to have to walk home in the dark, alone, well into the hour that devils come out to play. Just as an insidious, devil-riddled attraction came to town. She picked up her pace as she headed home. The streets were lined with houses painted in hues of white and pink and green, each at least 2 stories high with bay windows and wraparound porches that featured brightly colored doors. She always knew she would stay in Grim Manor, but sometimes she imagined herself in a pastel green house in the city, close enough to the French Quarter that she could walk to the cafes every morning, in the bookstore every afternoon. But her mother was gone, and that dream was now buried 6 feet under as well. Why can't you see that you're holding yourself back trying to fit into a mold mother made for you? She shook Genevieve's words from her mind. Everything is going to be okay, she told herself, keeping her focus on steadying her breathing as she headed down the main road out of the inner city. She knew she couldn't let her fixations overrun her mind out here, alone, in the dark. She counted out the miniatures in her head, knowing there should be only about 36 minutes more until she made it back to Grim Manor's front gate. Before she made it even 5 more minutes down the road, however, she caught a ghostly blue flash out of the corner of her eye. Ophelia stopped in her tracks. This was about where the old cathedral should be, but she couldn't make out its shape through the sun and fog. Her heart thundered in her chest as she broke her mother's first rule. She squinted into the dark. She couldn't see the apparition, but she knew it was there from the light vibration in the air that made the flesh on her arms pebble ever so slightly. She approached the gate, searching for the telltale flash of blue, her heeled boots crunching on the oak leaves and acorns littering the ground. She leaned her hands against the bars of the gates and found herself pitching forward when they split open with a rusty creak. She righted herself quickly, brushing her hands off on her skirt as she slipped through the crack she'd opened between the parting iron. "Hello?" Ophelia whispered. She practically heard her mother's scolding voice in the back of her mind. If she wasn't supposed to look at the dark, she certainly wasn't supposed to talk to it either. But there was no apparition in sight. She turned to leave. Odd. She had sworn there'd been a... "Can you see me?" a small squeaky voice asked. Ophelia glanced around in the direction of the voice, but nothing was there. Her mother classified ghosts on the other side into 4 categories: ghouls, apparitions, poltergeist, and phantoms. As the list went on, the abilities of the beings became stronger and more unpredictable. Ophelia knew that any being who was slightly transparent was just an ordinary apparition, a deceased soul that had yet to cross over. All the other beings were more solid, possessing the ability to change their appearances in various ways, unlike regular apparitions who could only appear as they did when they were laid to rest. Still, all should be visible, to her at least. "I can't see you, but I can hear you," Ophelia answered back, tone cautious. "Are you here to entertain me?" "No," Ophelia answered, breath hitching on the word as the energy in the air shifted. Where previously she had sensed it, a light vibration, the energy now settled over her skin as a warm, heavy static. "Is this some sort of trap?" Ophelia stumbled back toward the gates. "Why not?" the voice pouted. "I'm bored. We can play games." Ophelia opened her mouth to decline again when the locket around her throat suddenly began its unusual pulses. The sound of footsteps approached from somewhere in the distance. "You shouldn't be here," a new, much deeper voice drawled out from the fog now. "Uh-oh," the first apparition whispered before their energy disappeared an instant later. Ophelia swallowed. Like the other apparition, she couldn't see this new stranger, but she could feel them, and they felt much different. The closer they got, the further the static spread across her skin, caressing every bare inch, making goosebumps perk up on her forearms and legs. And when other things began to perk up from the unnerving warmth as well, she blushed furiously and rushed to wrap her arms over her chest. "Have you gotten lost?" the second stranger asked, a touch of humor in their tone. "If the dark looks at you, don't look back." But she couldn't help herself. Something was compelling her to stay in place. "No," she whispered. "You sound very sure about that," the stranger quipped as they came even closer. She squinted into the dark once more, trying to take another step forward, but it was as if there was an invisible wall in front of her, pushing her back. "What the hell?" she wondered aloud. "There are wards on these grounds," the deep voice explained. "Your trespassing seems to have awoken them. You cannot enter further unless you are granted permission." "Like a vampire?" she joked, though there was an edge of seriousness to her words. She swore she could hear the smile in the stranger's voice as they questioned. "Who were you speaking to before?" "I thought I had seen a ghost." There was a whisper of breath suddenly next to her right ear. "Boo!" Ophelia jumped as she felt the stranger's energy now pressing along the front of her body, making her flush even deeper. Glaring at the empty space before her, she muttered, "Ghosts are such a nuisance." "Who are you?" they asked, as if she hadn't spoken, tone more serious than before. "You look so familiar." Ophelia sighed. She supposed she ought to start getting used to the ghost of New Orleans, saying that to her now that her eyes nearly made her Tessie Grimm's doppelganger. "Well, I can't see you," she told them, "so I'm unable to help with any insight on the familiarity front." "Too bad," they said. "You're really missing out on my extraordinary handsome face." She resisted the urge to laugh. "I'll have to take your word for it." Something brushed gently across her cheek then. "Angel." Her brow furrowed. "Oh no, I'm not a... What's your name?" they interrupted, demanded with a new desperation. Ophelia didn't know why, but she wanted to answer them to tell her name to someone, or maybe something, new. Someone paying attention to her, making her heart race, just as she liked to fantasize about. But she didn't dare answer. This wasn't a fantasy. No, this was very real. And she knew in certain places, to certain kinds of beings, names held too much power to freely give them away. "What's your name?" she countered. "Ah, good girl." Something in their tone seemed disappointed despite the praise. You seem far cleverer than the tourists who've tried to sneak in here. Yet you're out in the dark, all alone. Don't you know what happens in the dark? The dark is for people who are too cowardly to face their actions in the light. She automatically responded. It had been something her mother often said. For a long moment, the stranger was silent, chirping crickets, the only sound in the night. Ophelia might have started to wonder whether they had left, if not for the unmistakable warmth still engulfing her. And she knew she must be losing her mind for thinking that warmth felt nice, for wanting to linger there just a little longer, to not be utterly, hopelessly alone. You should hurry and find wherever you belong, they finally said, a hint of warning in their tone. This isn't a place you want to be. Then why are you here? She asked. And who are you? Why can't I see you? None of those are the right questions. She narrowed her eyes at the empty space in front of her. What is? The stranger's breath was next to her ear as they whispered, How does one escape from here? She swore her heart was going to burst from her chest at those words, but she still didn't heed the warning bells in her mind. Feet staying firmly in place. She was too intrigued. The touch she'd felt on her chin a moment ago now trailed along her jawline and down the side of her neck to the crook of her shoulder, and she shivered. What do you mean, escape? She rasped. I thought you knew where you were, the voice questioned. Isn't this the old cathedral? She began, but before she could finish her sentence, the realization hit her. There was a quiet laugh from the stranger as she finally peeled herself away and scrambled to wedge herself back out of the gates. The wards, the missing church, the crowd they'd passed earlier in the motor car, the whispered rumors, the news article. She stepped backward until her eyes could finally make out the image through the fog, as if her realization had pulled back a veil covering her eyes. A calamitous Gothic estate. The wrought iron gates that stood at the start of the driveway were at least 20 feet tall. The bars were woven with metal vines spiked with thorns and embellished with onyx roses. Above the left gate, the letters PHAN were written in metal. A T sat in the middle where the two doors parted, and ASMA was written out above the right gate. Phantasma. The Devil's Manor. A place often spoke about in whispered rumors and haunting cautionary tales in the dark. Beyond the gates, which had been too crowded by nosy tourists before, sat the most expansive mansion Ophelia had ever seen. It was something out of the Gothic fantasy novels she'd read by candlelight in Grim Manor's library, with menacing black spires that pierced the sky like needles in east and west wings so long she didn't see how someone could live there without getting lost. The entire exterior was obsidian, so dark that even the live oaks that lined the grounds out front seemed to be bleached of color. Go home, the stranger advised. A house of devils is no place for an angel like you. The way they continued to call her angel made her think they were teasing her. And maybe she should have just heeded their warning and walked away. Maybe she should have been a lot more terrified than she was. But all she could think about was that, for now, she wasn't alone, and she wanted to linger in that feeling for as long as she could. Are you stuck here? She asked. No answer. She'd take that as a yes. Is there some way I can help you? She swore the heat emitting from the stranger turned up tenfold. Their next words were slow, deliberate. Do you really care to know? I did ask, she stated. It's my job, to help apparitions, I mean. And what if helping me would cause you harm, the stranger posed? Would you still be willing to assist me then? She stood there for another moment, debating before her feet made the decision for her. Teasing or not, the stranger had been right. She needed to go, to put as much distance between herself and this place as she possibly could. As she trailed away, she heard one last sultry whisper. A heart and a key would set me free, it said, but you should hope we do not meet again, angel. Chapter 7, Alone. About 20 minutes later, Ophelia was still trying to shake off the stranger's last words. But you should hope we do not meet again, angel. The 2-mile walk from the cathedral, or rather from Phantasma to Grim Manor, was usually scenic. The road that led out of the inner city was lined with the live oak and pecan trees, enormous homes sitting beyond them, away from the noise of the road. Marsh grass sprouted up anywhere untreaded on, and she could have sworn the air still carried the memory of magnolias from the spring. Tonight, however, the shadows and paranoia were drowning out anything Ophelia might have found pleasant. She'd stayed out much too late, and it was taking an alarming amount of time for the static sensation of the stranger's presence to dissipate. "If you don't get home in 5 minutes, Grim Manor will crumble to the ground," the shadow voice whispered in her head. Her shoulders tensed at the challenge. 5 minutes wasn't enough time, and it didn't matter that she knew logically it was not possible for her to cause such a travesty with only her thoughts, yet she picked up speed. "Nothing is going to happen if I don't make it back within 5 minutes, she chastised herself. The shadow voice isn't real. But it didn't matter how many times she told herself that. The intrusive thoughts always managed to make a traitor of her own mind. Her heart began to thunder louder than her footsteps on the ground. Her fists tightened at her sides as she passed the rose bushes that indicated the gates of Grim Manor would not be too much further ahead. Tick-tock, 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 the shadow voice urged. As the final 2 minutes counted down, she swallowed thickly, a pressure building right between her eyes as she pushed herself into a run. She was only a short sprint from the gates when she tripped over a fallen branch in the road. A burst of blue sparks expelled from her palms as she shoved her hands out in front of her to catch herself. But she didn't have any time to be surprised at the first glimpse of the pent-up magic. Tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. Her legs were tangled in her skirts, panic seizing as she thrashed on the ground. She twisted, rolling over into her back, but her time was almost up. The crickets stopped their chirping as her body seized with fear at missing her self-imposed window of time. Grabbing up her skirts, she lurched to her feet. Run! Her hands balled at her sides. No, she was going to resist it this time. She took a single shaky step, then another. She was close, so close. Snap! She froze. Suddenly twisting her head, she glanced behind her, scanning the dark for the source of the unnerving sound. Nothing was there. She took another step forward. Crunch. A branch broke beneath her heel. That was all it took for her to break into a full-blown sprint, shadows scattering out of her way as she pounded down the last stretch of road. She must have looked silly running from nothing, but as she neared Grim Manor's gates, the tightening in her chest began to loosen. 30 more seconds, the shadow voice warned. She cursed and swerved to the right, cutting across the damp grass, her boots squishing through the mud as she ran. She hit the wrought iron gates that opened the manor's driveway with open palms, a metallic clang ringing out as one of them swung wide open. Thorns from the rose vines wrapped around the gate posts, cut into her palms, and blood began to swell from the shallow wounds. She didn't have time to think about the pain as she propelled herself further down the driveway and onto the front porch, patting the front pocket of her dress for her key. 10, 9, 8. Another round of adrenaline flooded through her veins as she fumbled for the key, her blood slick hand a hindrance. When she finally dug the key out of her pocket, her hand shook as she jammed it into the lock and pushed the door open. She stumbled into the house and slammed the door shut. Blood smeared on the locks as she turned them. But once the door was securely fastened, she leaned back against the frame, swallowing large gulps of air to steady her heart rate. That was a close one. She squeezed her eyes shut at the voice. It had only been in her mind. It was always only in her mind. She looked down at her hands, at the crimson coating her palms. The sight induced a visceral reaction in her core. Images of her mother's lifeless body in their living room flickered through her mind. Pictures of Genevieve's face after she had yelled at her sister so callously in the alley. The blood needed to be washed away. She couldn't stand it on her hands. She tripped over herself as she dashed to the kitchen, turning on the faucet to fill the sink. She began scrubbing on the blood on her palms, ignoring the stings from the thorns as the porcelain turned pink with her effort. I need it to come off, she sobbed. I need it off. Never feel bad for bleeding, Ophelia. Her mother's voice came back to her now. Bleeding means you're alive. A sob caught in her throat, but she swallowed it. When her skin was as red and angry as she washed away blood, she wiped her hands over the skirts of her dress to dry them. Genevieve, she called out, voice shaky with desperation. Genevieve, where are you? I need to talk to you, please. The only answer was the echo of her own voice carrying through the dark. She made a beeline back toward the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, her breath shallow when she finally reached Genevieve's door. She knocked. Vivi, please. I'm sorry. Please don't leave me alone. No answer. Tears stung at the corners of her eyes as she sank to the ground outside of her sister's door, pulling her knees into her chest. "Please," she whispered one last time, "I'm so alone." Eventually she stood and made her way to her own room, taking time to bathe and wash away the rest of her sorrow before tucking herself into bed. She didn't fall asleep until well after midnight, and when she woke to the bell tolls that announced dawn, she knew something was very wrong. The first place Ophelia checked was Genevieve's room. Nothing seems off, but then again it was quite hard to tell when her sister's decor theme was clutter. Thinking Genevieve might be in the library, Ophelia got dressed for the day and made her way downstairs. Something small and pink caught her eye on the entryway table, an envelope. She must have missed it on her rush into the house. Her name written on the front in Genevieve's elegant penmanship. She dashed for the letter and tore it open, the foreboding that had been prickling through her body since she woke, reaching a crescendo. "Dearest sister, I hadn't meant for my departure to be in such haste, but after our conversation yesterday, I see now that this is the way things must be done. What you said, I knew that if I told you my plans beforehand, you would try to stop me. So, I will be gone by the time you find this letter. Seeing Mother in that coffin was almost too much for me to bear, but seeing you with no hope for your future is something I cannot live with. If all goes as planned, I will return in no more than 2 weeks' time. Let me be the one to bear the burden for once. With all my heart, Genevieve." "What have I done?" Ophelia whispered into the dark. Ophelia stuffed the letter in her front pocket and hauled herself up the stairs. She pushed her way inside Genevieve's room, this time noticing things she hadn't before. It wasn't the clothes strewn all over the bed and sticking out of the dresser, or the bits and bobs scattered across the vanity. That was all normal. It was the absence of Genevieve's suitcases, the missing jewelry pieces she knew her sister never left the house without, and the stationery littering the desk. Genevieve was really gone. Okay. We're going to stop there for today. We left off on page 58. So, wow. I'm kind of really getting into it. It's kind of a different feeling. I hope you guys are really liking it too. But in the fireplace in the background, I'm using natural lighting because I kind of think it's easier on the eyes, not as nice on my face, but when you watch something in natural light, I feel like it's easier. And a lot of people, I'm assuming, watch these videos in bed before they go to sleep, because that's like when most people do it. Or if you work nighttime, you're watching it in the daytime. I don't know. But thank you guys for being here. And so Genevieve is gone. Who do you guys think that the one apparition was that was speaking to her, that called her angel? Do you think she's actually an angel, Ophelia? I don't know. We'll find out. But this, I'm kind of excited. I'm getting into the fall feels. And reading helps take your mind off reality for a little while, like what's going on in the world. Oh, today is September 11th, and my thoughts are with every part of that. I was a junior in high school when that happened, and I remember it, we all sat there watching it on the news. Yeah. That was insane. That was a crazy day, and it's been a crazy, sad few days for America, but hopefully things start getting better and people start accepting each other, being nice to each other. Leave politics out of it. Like, this world needs healing. That's all I can say. But there's still good out there. The media is not going to show the good. Just know that it's out there. But thank you guys for being here for me. And I hope I'm that person for you. But thank you guys for being here, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.